Daniel's here. Correctivity for homeostasis, and thereby autonomy and sovereignty for European peoples, genus and species. The concept of unionization, structuring, social accountability, correctivity, coherence, homeostasis, agency, and warrant to coordinate with others and build coalitions for social advocacy and social justice. Okay, then. There are a few issues, or a few odds and ends that I wanted to correct from last time. Some are smaller details than others, and we'll probably begin with those. I guess I'll begin with one of the lesser important. And that would be my remarks regarding Johnny Depp not following it very carefully, not particularly interested about how these rich and famous folks are experiencing difficulties. But anyway, I was saying that I did make the remark that I thought that Amber Heard at least was a good enough actor to be fairly persuasive enough to make Johnny Depp look pretty bad in my just cursory sampling of her testimony. And that, well, maybe this all wasn't such a good idea for him to take up this case. But really, if he is, his case is about defamation and the fact that he was having difficulty getting work and so on because of damage to his reputation that she was causing. So I don't necessarily, I won't necessarily stand by the fact that he's ill-advised to take up this case. I'm running some kind of industrial vacuum cleaner next door. Maybe you can't hear it. Sorry about that. But the thing is that it provided occasion, this example provides an occasion to mark an important difference in gender relations, and something that I've never heard anybody discuss, though I've been observing this for decades and trying to bring it to attention. At first at university in the days before the internet. Of course, it fell on deaf ears. It's only of concern to the interest of white men, after all. And that is the double standard Now, first and second wave feminists, people nowadays might not recall this complaint, but it was one of their bigger complaints that there was a double standard with regard to sex and promiscuity, that it was somehow okay and for men to fool around, but not women. And the feminists were complaining that this is unfair. And I would rejoin to this that it's a double standard, but there's a fairness to it on balance, because it's more difficult by and large for men to be promiscuous. So arguably anyway, I'm not saying that this is good, but there's an argument an argument to be made that they are being sporting and taking on what can be a difficult challenge in trying to mess around with various women. On the other hand, it's generally not very hard for women to mess around and to find somebody to shack up with. And so they can be tremendous bullies in that regard, in the realm of sexual relations and an abuse of its value. Therefore, it's a double standard, but there's a fairness to it, roughly speaking. By the same token, I've always drawn the parallel that physical violence, getting physical, hitting, slapping and hitting the opposite sex, there's a double standard there as well, which is obviously justifiable. If a man hits a woman, he can really destroy her. He can really be a brutal bully. On the other hand, if a woman slaps a guy, there's a tradition which says that if the guy is really out of hand, and which he might be, and she slaps him, he should be able to withstand that and not not file a lawsuit. My argument is that Johnny Depp is, in some senses, not making himself look very good when he complains about that. He doesn't. I don't know that he does so much, but I just wanted to raise this example of traditional. These are traditional double standards now, and that. But it is to say that they're not necessarily wrong as relative double standards. But I also, thanks, Bigger. I also wanted to correct what it was that I said, that I don't know that Johnny Depp is right to take up this lawsuit. I think that he probably is right to, for the matter of defamation, of course, which is what his lawsuit is, not for abuse. However, that not being the case, I hope he wins and that she loses, and that she loses. She does indeed seem like a manipulative creep. ultra. Now then, Johnny Depp, like myself and many others who've had the misfortune of growing up surrounded by hostile women, does obviously have difficulty making good choices in partners and avoiding ones who are going to repeat that abuse. I remember the sexologist John Money saying that you're going to be prone to choose people who are like parents or difficult people that you've had in your life in order to work through problems. So I think that we sometimes choose actually people who are bad for us, abusive, because we want to try to overcome that, to show this person that somehow, no, you oughtn't be this way, and here's why. It doesn't work. So Johnny Depp found, so I found too. And it's really unfortunate because by the same token, undoubtedly Johnny Depp has, and I know that I have, it wound up passing on a lot of good women. I don't know how that is, but I can look on any number of women in my past that I might have taken on a date, and I say to myself, what the hell was wrong with her? And the answer is, well, not necessarily anything. She could have been perfectly fine. And I wound up mostly dating these jerks instead. Now, I was saying that I couldn't understand why Johnny Depp would leave. Was it Vanessa Paradis for Amber Heard? Vanessa Paradis, like, she seems really okay. She gave him 2 kids. She's beautiful. She's got these eyes going in different directions, all that neat stuff. But I look into her background, and she turns out to be someone who, from my perspective anyway, is dubious as well. She is the very one that was in this Joe LaTaxi video from back in 1987, MTV video with this really young French girl is singing in the foreground, Joe LaTaxi, just very sentimentally, and in the background is this black taxi cab driver. So you got a young girl, maybe even underage in the video, singing odes to this black taxi cab driver in the background, who's looking very lonely, and she's singing. And this was a perfect example, in a way, of a strategy on the part of our enemies that I call backgrounding, where they try to background the issue of promoting miscegenation. And it's particularly, it causes particular anxiety, this strategy. They'll put the interracial couple in the background. In this case, they got the black taxi cab driver. Well, not even really much in the background. He comes more and more to the foreground of the issue as the song goes on, but he's in the background. And the implication being that, it's beyond question. It's taken for granted. It's a background issue, and you're almost crazy for even noticing it, right? And you've got to accept it because it's part of the world kind of idea. And it always really bothered me. In this video, it was really bothered me. It's a kind of conditioning that kind of that if you care, like if you care about a woman like Vanessa Paradis, this can be upsetting to have to put up with that propaganda, and well, that's putting it mildly. It could just put you on a slow boil. And the fact is, this same girl who I noticed from this video, I didn't put two and two together until just today. It turns out to be, wind up with Johnny Depp. So this is the kind of woman. Well, I mean, he's prone to women who are, in one sense or another, kind of insensitive and manipulative. Let's put it that way. Okay. But I just wanted to bring up that issue of double standards, because that's important. I mean, yeah, it should be. It's not that it's good if men are promiscuous either, but it's even worse if women are, because it's easier, and they can be really terrible bullies in the realm of sexuality, and are. Okay, I'm going to talk about hippies in a second, because I want to wrap that issue up. I want to wrap it up for now. Let's say in the hermeneutic survey of concerns, because it is important in essence, but it's not important in the kind of myriad manifestations, or the manifold of its expression. And that's what people are going to latch onto and try to associate me with if they're somehow against me. Like I'm trying to defend, these idiots. I can't think of one hippie who's got a basic set of opinions that I remotely agree with. I find them all revolting, in fact. So that's not the thing. The thing is the essence of what it was about. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to cover the other small issues, if I can find any other small corrections. Oh, well, it's not small. None of these are really that small. When I was talking about Heidegger and how to approach Heidegger in a way that makes him easier to understand, and how he fits into an Aristotelian framework, same as Vico, I didn't quite set out that Aristotelian framework very clearly. Yes, centralized is praxis, which means your social group and the worldview they're from. And on one side, let's say, would be, aside from praxis, would be theoria, the world of cause and effect, and hard and fast theories that one might derive. That's on one side. So theoria, praxis, which is in central, which is the social world and your social group, and then on the other side would be poiesis. Now, poiesis is a matter of the arts and animation of the phenomenal and conceptual imaginative world, through narrative and other expression, conceptualization. And you'll when you understand things that way, you'll see what Heidegger is doing when he, for example, talks about poetry being more like thinking than science. He's trying to bring us back from the modernist Cartesian estrangement into Dasein, their being, and MIDTDASEIN, being amidst your people. And he's saying that this, you can see the framework in use. Poetry, for a number of reasons, being more like thinking than science. Okay, I don't want to elaborate on that right now. What I did want to explain more of, oh, there was one, wait a minute, there was one more thing. One more Heidegger. No, it wasn't related to Heidegger. It was a mistake in how I described the process or the chain of philosophy leading up to modernity. I was saying that the Epicureans were a forerunner of modernity, and that's true. The Epicureans, which is one of the major schools of Rome, along with the Stoics. These are Greek schools which were popularized in Rome. The Epicureans wanted to trace everything to physical causes. They invented the word the atom as the smallest physical unit. They were against tradition, superstition, mere tradition, superstition, custom, habit, and they wanted to manage the use of pleasure hierarchically and responsibly. But anyway, this was a forerunner of modernity, and as these things, as perspectives reacted to facile rhetorical abuse, let's say, just to make this quick. Plato's reaction to the sophists, the medieval folks' guilt trips by way of Christianity, which is arguably another form of sophistry, an abusive praxis, a red caping of our moral order and a false opposition, which the guilt trips of which created purity spirals for pure warrant, like notably Descartes and John Locke. On Descartes, the beyond nature side, and John Locke, the within nature side. Now, what I said that was wrong in listening back was that I just made a connection between the Epicureans and the modernist characteristic that came about of valuing change and what is new as somehow necessarily better, and because it was progressing toward some sort of universal foundation. There's not I made it sound like there was a direct connection there. There wasn't. That came about to be characteristic of modernity, but it's not like, I shouldn't have made it sound like this comes from the Epicureans. Anyway, yes, and this idea of progress and tradition is bad, and what's new is good, and what's new becomes quickly and the charm loop of modernity becomes quickly exhausted, and you got to start searching for what's new all over again. And this sort of led to this culminated in World War One, and they just and the destruction there was led to the utter disillusionment with the idea of progress and technology and modernity. Baron brilliantly put together what would have been Heidegger's psychological circumstance in that situation. So that's where the postmodern turn begins to really take hold. There were Vico tried, but he was an obscure monk in southern Italy, so Kevin MacDonald wouldn't pay him any respect anyway. Okay, so I think that those corrections are out of the way, and those are important corrections to make. But the next thing to get into, I want to address the hippies one more time for now, and then put it aside for a while. I want to put it aside for a while because I don't want people to think that I'm fixated on this issue as a cause for the hippies in all their manifestation. That wouldn't be true. And furthermore, what they were manifesting, which is being, a motive for being for white men, their being in Heidegger's terms, and being amidst your people, DASEIN and MIDTDASEIN, is part of a hermeneutic process of concerns. So it's a process. It's not supposed to be a matter that I'm fixed on, or anybody. It's most fundamental, of course, and that's why it's important to get right. It was most important for Heidegger, there being associated with care. It was capitalizes care in relation to what do you care about? Are you objective, or are you a detached theoretician, treating the world as if it's a matter of physics, or are you paying attention to to the matter of care and your relative interests, their being amidst your people? Okay, but it is a very fundamental issue, and here's the and it's important to note that indeed it's been buried and distracted from, and there's been nobody else but me who's calling attention to how important this is. It remains vitally important for our people that a certain intrinsic value be ascribed to our men, a certain fundamental value for having survived, for being a part of all the good that we've done, for being a part of the women that we have part in creating. And being means, of course, life. The right to look after our survival and our species. Okay, so it's, that, of course, the hippies in America being toward death with the Vietnam draft, this was a very real motive, and criminally lacking in articulation of the fact. But I went into a criticism of David McGowan. I'm not going to go into it again. But he's not alone in astroturf in trying to say that this was astroturfed, and it couldn't be more clear. An organic motive to to not want to be drafted to die on the other side of the world when there's no clear and imminent danger to you or your women or your nation. To reject as mere tradition that men should go to war and die or risk themselves. So it's a very important issue, and it's tricky, of course, because you're flying in the face of heavy tradition and habit, or what exactly is to be expected of a man. Okay. And I don't think, well, obviously it shouldn't be cannon fodder. It's a very important issue, and the hippies were a manifestation of that. Now, here's the important thing, and why I want to get away from it, and the concern is that, as I said, I can't think of a single hippie whose opinion that I value. Not one. I mean, I listen to David Crosby, I want to puke. Any of them. Neil Young. Yeah, really. The music, yeah, it's really, really cool music. I don't know, I'm not endorsing the lyrics either, but musically, yeah. I mean, I like. That's one thing I have to say. The musical stylisms, the psychedelic stuff, I really like it. Stylistically, artistically, and guys having long hair, oh, that's cool. I don't know, if it works too well on older guys. Whatever. Civil War veterans had long hair, and guys, European guys from the Middle Ages had long hair. Long hair is cool, no problem. As I was saying with Angela the other day, I love hip hugger jeans on women. But the concern is, I would be concerned if people would think that I am endorsing the particular manifestations, particularly the hippies, inarticulate as they were, or misguided even, in the case of a David Crosby, terribly misguiding. Or really anything else about them. I'm not as if I'm going to be down on somebody if they like having short hair and dressing neatly. They want a more traditional life or appearance. Um, it is and has been of concern to me, though, that the associations, or the burying of this motive, and the associations with it of largely of YKW media, because after all, what do they care about white male being? They don't. They try to say that the 60s was all about civil rights. It was all about free love. And I've wanted to be clear that, Herbert Marcuse's free love, it's polymorphous perversion, an idea derived from, the Freudian attack, is definitely not in the interests of white men. This is an affectation. If men from everywhere are soliciting for free love, and your women are giving free love, this is not being for white men. This is a state of increasing acute anxiety for most men. Yeah, okay, as we know, you have the few alphas who have the life of Riley, whatever. But by and large, this is not being for men. And this is not being amidst your people, because there is no amidst your borders have been destroyed. So this obfuscation, this burying of this fundamental motive as part of this retooling of Maslow's hierarchy of motives, is very important to bring out from under the debris of years of it's being buried with other issues, and of course, like I like to say, and was true, that feminism went into overdrive when the Vietnam draft ended, because the society no longer had to be somewhat easier on men, because this was a clear implication of the absurdity of feminism as a body politic that would complain that it was being treated unfairly when they didn't have to go to war and die for nothing, but men did. Do you see? There's an elephant in the room there. But it's an elephant in the room that, here's where I want to finish this off, and why it continues to be an annoyance. Yeah, it bothers me. Of course, it bothers me when the kosher folks obfuscate this issue, as they always have. It's predictable, and it annoys me when right wingers, the old hard hat type, and the ultra macho types who didn't like hippies, they have their crew getting the white. They can't understand why people don't want to go to war and die, whatever. That's annoying. But there's a special kind of annoyance that comes from, to me anyway, when right-wing trad women, especially from younger generations, speak disparagingly of hippies. Really annoys me. like these are, like, you know, excuse me, honey, these guys were supposed to go and die, which they did. 56,000 of them, I think it was, so that you can have tire rubber or whatever, or so that you could clear away the dead wood. I've heard some trad women talk that way. Actually, using that disgusting language. But we had now I was re-prompted.
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily going to revisit this issue just now, but we had Arval, this philosophy graduate, and I'll put him, you know, I won't go into a big thing about Arval, but I tried talking to him once for 5 minutes. He said he was open to talking to people, and he was so rude to me that I don't care if I ever talk to him again. But anyway, he tried to dismiss me, and which only for me just confirms he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But here he is interviewing Philosopher Cat, I think yesterday. But she's the one. I don't, you know, I shouldn't call her an airhead, but I will. The one who said we ought to put aside our group differences as the issue, and now all join hands to take on the flu world order. She said that millennial you, and anybody with any sense is thinking, okay, here's a girl putting in her opinion, you know, and you know, and groan face palm. But it gets worse for me anyway. Here she is talking to Arval, and this came to my attention.
You know, what do you do that connects you with that principle?
Yeah, that's something I've struggled with a lot, because since I'm not pinned down to a specific religious tradition, I'm not really adopting the practices of one or another, and I'm reluctant to mix and match traditions in that regard. So at the moment, for me, I'm just mainly just trying to kind of constantly keep mindful of God and a divine presence, and try to stay on, you know, a higher vibe in the course of my daily life. Make sure that I'm living in line with my principles, living with integrity. And, you know, that's not probably very traditionalist. So this is one of the reasons why maybe I wouldn't call myself a traditionalist, because to some extent you have to have a practice, and feeling like I don't know what the right practice is results in something of a paralysis in me, where I'm like, well, if I don't know what the right one is, I shouldn't choose until I'm sure. This is why I also don't tell people who follow my channel what path they should take. I say, you know, you have to discover that for yourself. Maybe that path is different for everybody, but in terms of discovering the right one for me, I've found things that, you know, I kind of like, but there's stuff that I don't necessarily agree with or whatever. You know, for example, as much as I like the Vedic tradition, there are parts of it that I just don't necessarily agree with following. Like, I don't agree with the dietary principles of that tradition. And so that would, if I were seeking initiation, would automatically exclude me. So it's just stuff like that, right? But, you know, I try to, you know, do meditation or yoga or whatever, and just generally try to practice a loving compassion and live with right action.
Right, which I guess is excusable for you. You are American, right?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
born in America.
I would say it's excusable for Americans in particular because we're less grounded in tradition. Like many of us grew up with Christianity, but in another sense, we're kind of our own civilization coming into being, yet to define our spirituality. Even though we have kind of common English origins, there are divisions within there in terms of spiritual traditions, different varieties of Protestantism. You have like the Anglican, Presbyterian, Puritan, which each of which have different values, different emphasis on the nature of free will, different concepts of these spiritual ideas, different practices. So we're still kind of figuring things out, and also I'd say our civilization is at a turning point where we have to reformulate some things from a very deep level. So I will, forgive this kind of lack of distinctions and, experimenting with what works, because that's, what else ultimately can you do in a position like ours? So do you think that your experience with spirituality is reflective of other people that you've met your age, your peers? Do you see your journey as part of a broader social trend? Do you see any pattern there?
Possibly. If there is a trend, I don't know how far ahead of that trend I might be, but there, when society reaches like peak cynicism, which is kind of part of this atheistic and nihilistic phase that we're sort of going through as a culture, at some point that's going to run its course and the pendulum is going to swing back the other way. And so it's possible that my own personal journey is like this microcosm overall trend. Just like I went through this atheist phase as an individual, maybe society is going through their own atheist phase on like this bigger scale and longer time frame. Because it's not sustainable for society to stay on this course. The question is, when it swings back to spirituality, what is that going to look like? Is it going to be authentic? What tradition might they latch on to, if any? I dislike Christianity for my own reasons, which, not to be offensive to any Christians in the chat, because I don't dislike Christians. It's just not a path for me. But I'd rather almost see society go back to that than go towards something like this, this kind of new age hippie spirituality, which is, I find very destructive.
Okay. Now, my thing is that singling out or kind of identifying, putting the hippies together with new age stuff necessarily, and calling hippies destructive, it's, to me, such a trad bitch thing to do. Again, because of what the essence of that motive was and what was important about it. And to me, she's like saying, oh, those guys were just, how dare they? They were just, how dare they, want to fight for their existence? They were just supposed to die in Vietnam. So I find it very offensive when, quote, neo-trad women speak contemptuously of hippies. She was skirting some of the issues at hand. Yeah, we have to rest from our experiences and requirements and needs, what it is that's sacred for us and so on. I've talked about that a lot, but still, that remark irritated me, especially in relation to Arvel, who was so disrespectful of me. And here he is interviewing this girl who will get like zillions of views for. Now, I'm not calling her an airhead for no reason. It's not only that she's a bit scatterbrained here, and denouncing here what she considers hippie spirituality. She's going to go on to talk about how she's an astrologer, and she'll do an astrology reading for you. So there you go. but she should be taken seriously, right? Well, okay. Maybe she should have tens of thousands of views, more than me. Maybe she should. Don't think so. Okay, now that's just the first example on this score. Again, this is that knowing the issues. This is what, you know, and I've accused, I've been critical of Lana Lockduff for the same reason in the past. Oh, the hippies and the lefties. You know, these women are like, they're like the Nazi women. It's like, you know, suddenly it's great to be right wing and be done with the dead wood. Let the men kill each other and breed with the winter. It's nasty. The essence of this thoughtless disparagement going along with the, you know, this right wing disparagement of hippies in essence. Again, you know, I can understand people being offended by particular manifestations, but the manifestations and the individual people, you know, John Lennon singing Imagine and saying that the 60s were a great way to pick up women. They were inarticulate at best, and some of them actually became liberal spokespeople for, you know, may as well, couldn't have been better spokespeople for our enemies. And I don't want it thought that I'm defending that. I'm defending, in essence, a very essential, important motive that's there, right below rights in the hippie manifestation. Now, there was another example, and it came with an interview by Ed Dutton, and he interviewed some time back this woman named Justine Brown, and she grew up. She had hippie parents, and they joined a commune, which, by the way, is not. It's not something that I see as necessarily a part of DASEIN and MIDTDASEIN. I can understand what people would try, but I think that communes, like all communities, are generally too small, and personalities will make them, in the end, impossible. Gossip. You're, in a way, knowing a little bit too much about people. I know that people talk about how great community is. Rams Paul, oh, this is the thing to do to build community. Well, good luck. For me, the community is the nation. And where you have enough space to unfold your way of life and not be inundated by gossip and bizarre egos and personalities and so on. But anyway, this woman, Justine Brown, is very down on hippies. She had hippie parents, and they joined a commune in Vancouver or in West Canada in, I guess, the late 60s, early 70s probably. Late 60s, early 70s. And she was talking about how terrible this was, how the hippies. Well, I thought she made one good comment that kind of did correspond with my experience. the hippies kind of reversed the relations between parents and children, where the children seemed like the wise men, the wise people, what does Rousseau say about the noble savages that the parents would learn from, almost kind of thing. There was a bit of that. I mean, I'm not saying that the practices of hippies, I'm not defending them or their articulation of the fact. Matter of the fact that is a big part of the problem, because the motive for DASEIN is it's not a matter of analysis and parsing political issues and making elaborate logical sense. On the contrary, it's a matter of organic synthesis, and almost by definition, you're not going to be particularly verbose and articulate, and they weren't, and they weren't. But because of that, you can't make your case, and in some instances, you're going to be prone to misguidance, as was the case in Justine Brown's situation. Now, she, I think, remains irresponsible, because she starts up by saying, indeed, that her father was dodging the Vietnam draft. Now, well, is that wrong? I should think not. That her father was very correct to do that. On the other hand, these times corresponded with, I'm talking about being at the essence that was being sought, and being with your people. This was occurring within the time of the hierarchy of motives, the human potential movement. And hold your thought. Take a leak. I'll be right back. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so you have the boomer generation and the America's what seems like what it does have to offer, despite the obvious downsides even then in the 60s. What it does have to offer is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, so to speak. Which corresponds quite a bit with the human potential movement, which one particular salient expression was Maslow's hierarchy of motives, which Betty Friedan and the feminists latched onto, in seeing the top of the hierarchy as necessary for self-actualization, as necessary for the liberation of women from the fetters of the housekeeper's, dismal limitations. of the 50s. Now, all that talk was going on while men were being sent to Vietnam to die. Women were complaining that they don't have, self-actualization. So clearly there's something more basic, lower grumbles, as Maslow would call them, that men have that are not being attended to, and never were, amazingly. I'm the only one saying this to this day. But there were, feminists saying that they needed, self-actualization, all this comparatively conceited stuff that they were complaining about, their high grumbles. It's just part of the reason why I find it so offensive when trad women are set blame on hippies for, as like, a place where things go wrong, things went wrong, and people who are somehow just necessarily really bad. And well, let me play you this. This is Ed Dutton, and he man, does this guy get on my nerves too. But listen to this.
It says, in listening to this discussion, one is reminded of the wise words of Ed's young child, hippie is bad. Hippie. Yes, that's. I don't know if you saw that about what I said about that, but when my daughter was about 2, I she must have asked me like why a person was dressed in a funny way, or something, what it was that it happened, and I said that person is a hippie, and she asked me what's a hippie, and I just, she's about 2 years old and 2.5, and I just explained to her that hippies are they're bad, they want bad things, and they dress like that, and they think they're better than everybody else, and they're bad. And then one day I was pushing her along the street in her buggy, and there was this hippie walking towards us, and she insisted that we cross the road. And I was like, why? She insisted, she was getting quite angry about this, that we had to cross the road. So I pushed her across the road. I said, why do we have to cross the road? And she said, because that is hippie and hippie is bad. Which is finished, that is hippie and hippie is bad. Hippie is evil.
So this is the kind of stupid shit that Ed Dutton is saying in pandering to this woman in his ignorance. And he's, Ed Dutton is a fairly ignorant guy, let's be honest. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to go back and listen to a bit more of what Judith Brown perhaps has to say. But the interesting thing is she is discussing hippies with Ed Dutton there, and her experience, as I said, with the commune and her negative experience with her hippie parents. Now, what's interesting is that her father, she says, went on to be sort of a leader of their commune, and he started having affairs with all these women, and he left her mother, and he was very promiscuous and obviously selfish. Now, again, these, and furthermore, she was saying that her father and this commune was basing its outlook on Fritz Perls. He is one of the more popular and known figures of the human potential movement of that time. Of course, kosher. And none of this is registering with her. Of course, it's no criticism of the kosher stuff that's going to come by way of her, and certainly not of Ed Dutton, because the guy's totally irresponsible. But now Fritz Perls is part of this human potential movement, which of course is a very selfish thing. and it's characteristic of the boomers. And you'll see this stuff, this psychological stuff and almost mystical Zen-like stuff, whatever kind of jive they can put across, manifesting in the likes of guest worker, for example, over at Majority Rights. It's lurking in the background of why he thinks that he's so cool. But the point is that this is a very selfish ideology that's being put across, and it's an affectation. This is not Fritz Perls is not an articulate expression of what the hippie motive was about. It's, on the contrary, it's a misguiding of it. Let me read from Fritz Perls' page. It's not a long wiki article. Frederick Simon Perls, July 8th, 1893 to March 14th, 1970, better known as Fritz Perls, was a German-born psychiatrist, German, right? He's quite kosher, psychoanalyst and psychotherapist. Perls coined the term Gestalt therapy to identify the form of psychotherapy that he developed with his wife, Laura Perls, in the 1940s and 1950s. Perls became associated with the Esalen Institute in 1964 and lived there until 1969. Esalen's like this kind of New Age Disneyland, or kind of New Age psychology Disney World on the Californian coast. The core of Gestalt therapy process is enhanced awareness. You'll hear GW talk a lot about that stuff too, of sensation, perception, bodily feelings, emotion, and behavior in the present moment. Like, that's so important, right? Relationship is emphasized along with contact between the self, its environment, and the other. Like, well, what relationships? What other? Free love. Fritz Perls was born in Berlin, Germany in 1893. He grew up in the Bohemian scene in Berlin, participated in Expressionism and Dadaism. Now there you go. The cartoon of postmodernism would be Dadaism, and experienced the turning of the artistic avant-garde toward the revolutionary left. Oh yes, of course. Deployment to the front line, the trauma of war, anti-Semitism, intimidation, escape, and the Holocaust are further key sources of biographical influence. He was expected to practice law following his distinguished uncle Hermann Staub, but instead he studied medicine, and Perls joined the German army during World War I and spent time in the trenches. After the war in 1918, he returned to his medical studies, graduating 2 years later, specializing in neuropsychiatry and as a medical doctor, and then became an assistant to Kurt Goldstein, who worked with brain-injured soldiers. Perls gravitated towards psychoanalysis. In 1927, Perls became a member of Wilhelm Reich's technical seminars in Vienna. Reich's concept of character analysis influenced Perls to a large extent, and in 1930, Reich became Perls' supervising analyst in Berlin. In 1930, Perls married Laura Perls, born Laura Posner, and they had 2 children together, Renat and Stephen. In 1933, soon after and the Hitler regime came into power, being of Jewish descent and because of their anti-fascist political activities in time for Perls, Laura and their eldest child Renat fled to the Netherlands. 1 year later, they emigrated to South Africa, where Perls started a psychoanalytic training institute. In 1936, he had a brief and unsatisfactory meeting with Freud. In 1942, Perls joined the South African Army. He served as an army psychiatrist with the rank of captain until 1946. While in South Africa, Perls was influenced by holism. That's another word you'll hear from GW, of John Smuts, as if, Perls owns this kind of thinking or something, holistic thinking. During the period of Fritz Perls, co-wrote his first book, Ego, Hunger, and Aggression, published in 1942 and republished in 1947. Laura Perls wrote 2 chapters of the book, although when it was republished in the United States, she was not given any recognition for her work. Fritz and Laura Perls left South Africa in 1946 and ended up in New York City, where Fritz Perls worked briefly with Karen Horney and Wilhelm Reich. After living through a peripatetic episode during which he lived in Montreal and then served as a cruise ship psychiatrist, Perls finally settled in Manhattan. Perls wrote his second book with the assistance of New York intellectual and author Paul Goodman, who drafted the theoretical second part of the book based upon Perls' handwritten notes. Perls and Goodman were influenced by the work of Kurt Levin and Otto Rank. Along with the experimental first part written with Ralph Hefferlein, the book was entitled Gestalt Therapy and published in 1951. I actually read that one. Thereafter, Fritz and Laura Perls started the first Gestalt Institute in their Manhattan apartment. Fritz Perls began traveling throughout the United States in order to conduct Gestalt workshops and training. In 1960, Fritz Perls left Laura Perls behind in Manhattan and moved to Los Angeles, where he practiced in conjunction with Jim Simkin. He started to offer workshops at Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California in 1963. Perls became interested in Zen, yes, of course. Again, it's like, our friend over that majority rights, during this period, and incorporated the idea of mini satori, a brief awakening, wonderful, into his practice. He also traveled to Japan, where he stayed in a Zen monastery. Eventually, he settled at Esalen and even built a house on the grounds. One of his students at Esalen was Dick Price, who developed Gestalt practice, based in large part upon what he learned from Perls. At Esalen, Perls collaborated with Ida Rolf, founder of Rolfing Structural Integration. Is it the thing where you stick your hand inside you try to get, right inside your gut and massage your guts to address the relationship between mind and body? Perls has been widely cited outside the realm of psychotherapy for a quotation often described as the Gestalt prayer. Now listen to this. This is, emblematic of the selfishness and the misguidedness of the human potential movement. Listen, Fritz Perls' Gestalt prayer. I do my thing, and you do your thing. I am not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you are not in this world to live up to mine. You are you, and I am I. And if by chance we find each other, it's beautiful. If not, it can't be helped. Fritz Perls, Gestalt Therapy Verbatim, 1969. And this is the kind of stuff that Judith Brown's father was being misguided by. In 1969, Perls left Esalen and started a Gestalt community at Lake Cowichan in Vancouver Island, Canada. And that's what she was saying. This is where Judith Brown was, in the Fritz Perls community there. So what I'm saying is she's blaming hippies, and, I say blame them for being inarticulate. Indeed, but don't. Using that word hippie and blaming hippies per se is to go along with this obfuscation by the likes of Fritz Perls in misdirection, but like Fritz Perls and many, many others, of that most fundamental issue of DASEIN, of being, for men in particular. And being with, or being with your people. And it's not at all mutually exclusive to being for women either. It's just that tended to be granted. You know, you could violate the being of women, but this would be a very big taboo. That's my point. It was traditional that a woman's being was to be respected, not necessarily a man's, though. Almost on the contrary, when he came of age, he was to be subjected to all sorts of, he might be subject to all sorts of ignominious bullying in order to prove his manhood, including being required to go to war and die. So the intrinsic valuation of men was not there. That's why I say, you know, this thing is important, and it's awkward to articulate. It's, you know, going against taboo. Fritz Perls died of heart failure in Chicago on March 14th, 1970, after heart surgery at St. Louis, at Louis A. Weiss Memorial Hospital. Perls' approach to therapy was included in criticism by Jeffrey Masson, a psychoanalyst who feuded with journalists and with the psychoanalytic community generally over his controversial theories disputing the effectiveness of psychotherapy. Masson said that Perls was a sexist as well as physically and emotionally abusive towards women in his private life. Masson quoted Perls from his autobiography in and Out, the Garbage Pail, where Perls wrote, "Once I was called to a group to calm down a girl who attacked everyone in the group physically. The group members tried to hold her and to calm her down in vain. Again and again she got up and fought. When I came in, she charged with her head down into my belly and nearly knocked me over. Then I let her have it until I had her on the floor. Up she came again, and then a third time I got down again and said, gasping, I've beaten up more than one bitch in my life. Then she got up, threw her arms around me. Fritz, I love you. Apparently she finally got what all her life she was asking for, a beating. And there are thousands of women like her in the States, provoking and fantasizing, bitching, irritating their husbands, and never getting their spanking. You don't have to be a Parisian prostitute to need that so as to respect your man. A saying is, my husband lost interest in me. He never beats me anymore. So anyway, this is the guru of that particular community, which has Judith Brown, devoting a whole discussion, a whole book apparently, a discussion of a whole book of hers with what's his name? A whole community there in Lake Cowichan, Vancouver, and with Ed Dalton, who's happy to go along, and with this scientific bullshit, boring scientific bullshit of Ed Dutton. Let me see if I can see anything more of what Judith Brown has to say.
The only things that were authentic were these kind of very dreary, serious, emotionally loaded things. But yeah, so they were reacting to what they believed was a straight-laced, restricted, and oh, there's someone coming in. Someone has arrived at the cocktail.
Oh, well, cheers, everybody, cheers, yes, cheers with your cocktails, cheers, no name, nimble horse, grape soda, and everyone else that's
experiment from the point of view of the government, as they are for teenagers, and then but the kids on the communes were getting systematically abused. I mean, that was one of their features. You know, God is love and love is sex, and there should be no boundaries between anything and anybody, and so everyone should be having sex at all times.
But there was no.
And again, the free love, free sex stuff. This was Herbert Marcuse, another kosher affectation, and who's like just a even worse manifestation of Freud. And again, Herbert Marcuse, by the way, was the mentor of all right-wingers' friend Paul Gottfried. You know, in their joint effort against the quote left.
There was no sexual elements to the cults you were in, or the communes you were in.
No, and I mean, there was a lot of nudity. Adults were having sex with each other, and like free love was fairly.
So, as a 6-year-old, did you witness just random adults having sex?
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah, a bit of that. Yeah, but there's a lot of family breakdown, and this is like, one of my big bones that I have to pick with these hippie communes is that, there are some things, like, for example, moving to the country, living a simple life, maybe rejecting modernity. There are things in hippie communes and the back to the land movement, which is another side to this, like the idea of rejecting industrialization, going back to the land, being self-sufficient. I mean, you hear a lot of people on the right talking about these ideas at the moment. And so, but the difference is that, you have to ensure that you have traditions and, families that are going to nurture families and nurture and nurture structure. And that is what was missing there. So you had, like, if the family wasn't already broken down before people joined the group, it would be by the time they left. Because,
well, as a consequence of things like free love and people having affairs and
a lot of people having affairs and so they would try to embrace, like free love, and actually it doesn't work. People, they want to claim that it's unnatural to be people.
Like I said, that's an affectation, and it's always important. Free love is an affectation. That's not consonant with male being, and I'm always eager to make that point. And it's been confirmed by others that this was not their motive, or Vietnam vet.
Fact that the incomers who were more middle class and worked from Soynton get married in silence, and you exchange your vows in.
And part of a kind of more informal commune scene where people were living in little cabins that they built, and there was no electricity, and we had no hot water. They often communes do have that, but it's like, the question is, does it control its members to a huge extent? Do seem to have a fairly good thing going, right? I mean, they're fairly successful as a group. They seed crop, right? Like, all the traditions kind of went out the window.
Way individualism, and therefore runaway equality, and therefore basically, facts are hate. And
anyway, so this woman's become a Catholic, and good luck with that. Like, you're going to protect our children that way. She goes on, and she's just. My point is that these people who use the quick label of hippie, and applying it as something necessarily bad, are performing a disservice, because as I said, it was a manifestation of something fundamental. Now, just to finish off, you're not supposed to. Being in MIDTDASEIN is a part of a hermeneutic process. most fundamental MIDTDASEIN, being amidst your people. You can't choose that. You are born amidst your people, right? And there's no being without your people. You're not going to have food and basic needs in the hierarchy of needs without your parents and so on, and the literal food chain of the society. But then the requirement is, that MIDTDASEIN is part of a broad socialization, which is the most fundamental and arguably only real distinction, that they're the only ultimate distinction is your social relation, and that is that's where you come into. And as you develop, as you become socialized, or would be properly socialized, you would have a concept of unionization, as we're saying here, which would provide for responsibility, social accountability. And you would develop some routines to go by, to take care of the chores and ordinary concerns of your life, and to learn the practices that go into a useful and enjoyable life for your people. That routine is something, an aspect of this process of socialization that is criminally undervalued for its importance. It's undervalued by the valuation of the pursuit of greatness, happiness, pleasure, all that. By the human potential movement. And yet can be and will be enjoyable of itself. Life on that level, just routine, just living your life and doing things that you need to do in an everyday way. Not always necessary, but it's enjoyable. But the point is, it's necessary. It's necessary to yourself, for maintenance, but also necessary in the sense that you're not going to have a basis for anything more and greater unless you master these routines. So there would be mentorship that corresponds with routines, learning from the craftsmen or whatever, the teachers of yore, and on that same and on that same level, that is to say, a level that just about anybody is going to be equipped for, which is a good thing, because that means that you don't have to be super great at something in order to do this, is going to be a concern for sacrament and reverence for what is sacred to our people. A recognition of the agreement of episodes, practices, institutions that are vital, that are in a perennial sense, patterns that transcend, that they may be manifest or revered through episodic practice, but they transcend the episode, of course, and connect with the patterns transcendent of our forebears and through our children and grandchildren, hopefully. And this is very important because we need that connection to the transcendent, the semi-transcendent, I don't want to say, of our patterns, of our people, of our social group. What's very good about us, because many of our people are deficient, destructive, bad people, and we can't let that cause us to be cynical about our people and to become yet another traitor. And the rest of us who are pretty good are also, of course, are only human and quite flawed, and therefore we need that to connect with that transcendent aspect for our own sake too, so that we don't become down on ourselves and recognize the fact that we are worthy, we are connected to that worthy pattern. These two things, routine and sacrament, respect for them, which is not there in the Gestalt prayer. It's not there in the human potential movement. Will stabilize the social group. And this should occur on a national level because that's big enough, whereas these communes are not big enough. They will stabilize the social group and provide for a sense and recognize for the enjoyment and pleasure that they provide, but just anybody can do. Will stabilize not only the pattern, but it will also bring under control, provide basis for self-actualization for those who want to pursue more, and yet bring it under control because it's fundamentally ensconced in socialization. There's a recognition there that you're not beyond socialization and never should mistakenly think of yourself as such. You are not the exception. There is not an exception. There is not a Schmidian exception. Now, I don't want to, in saying this, I don't want to say that I'm against self-actualization, however you might want to see that, whether in the Aristotelian sense of simply manifesting the teleology of your inborn capacities, or the the modernist sense of transcending the limitations that you thought you had. Well, this is what we want to get away from. We want to move. That's the That's the Maslowian thing. The quantifying one step of needs satisfaction fulfilled leads to another until finally, you have these peak experiences, and it's just like, this is the ultimate. So that we want to put that into the postmodern turn, is what we're saying, where you step towards actualization, whether self-actualization means political relevance, recognition for your abilities as an artist, or just coming into being as what nature provided for. That this is a part of a process, that it doesn't end there, and it's ensconced in socialization and social accountability. Because after all, this is part of the horror of America. You go there and let's say you become great in some way, even. Well, who've you done it for? If anything, you might have just contributed to the disordering of what is already a mess with your, transcending of the social order. Oh, good. Anyway, what I'm saying is that the human potential movement and this kind of narrow hedonism and the dark sides of it, the reflexive effect for straining for self-actualization when you don't have your basic needs fulfilled, as the hippies didn't, or the hippies in the sense of Vietnam resistors and men generally. The routine was not respected, the sacrament was not respected, their being was not respected, their MIDTDASEIN was not respected. Despite that privation, trying or feeling that they had to reach self-actualization, however that's conceived, was going to have reflexive effects, especially when they're mocked when they do achieve, by feminists saying that they got there because they were privileged, when in fact they were at a disadvantage from the start. Many of them, not all of them, some of them were well taken care of from the get-go. A lot of them, especially the ones who are manifesting pathologies and sociopathology, are just guys who are desperate because they didn't have their basic needs, markedly socialization and the security of boundaries, taken care of, and yet felt compelled to pursue actualization, and were mocked and abused by women nevertheless, even if they did succeed despite that privation. And so you have all sorts of misogyny and abuse of women coming about. But just to wrap that up for now, and I didn't put that in some places quite as well as I would have liked, but it's in the ballpark. It really bothers me when people go along with what it really is the kosher and right-wing obfuscation that is ascribing to hippies a particularly bad responsibility. I might just say simply, what were they supposed to do? Go to Vietnam and die for you? But it's more fundamental than that. It's a fundamental motive for DASEIN, their being, and MIDTDASEIN, being amidst your people, which is most fundamental in the postmodern turn from Cartesian estrangement, and most necessary, remains most vital in concern of our people. That, yes, our men too be assigned intrinsic value. Now, I fully appreciate that now more than ever, women too are being abused on the most fundamental level. They're not being allowed their being. But traditionally, anyway, it's been the tradition that women are to be respected. Their being is to be respected. And if you violate their being, you're violating a very big taboo. Okay, so, it's part of the hippie stuff. This is part of it, but it's part of a process, being and DASEIN and MIDTDASEIN. It's part of the process. And I don't want it. It's in that hermeneutic survey. First thing of which is to check out, of course, what the YKW are up to. The second thing, what our traders are up to, and the people who don't care are up to, the liberals. But what's the first on the agenda of the day changes, and sometimes it's going to be being and MIDTDASEIN. It's always relevant, and it's on the carousel there of concerns. I don't, but because it is part of the process and on the carousel of concerns, that's just one reason why I don't want to get stuck and have people think that this is like a big obsession of mine, hippies. It's not. I do find it very irritating, particularly when you're trad women not understanding and criticizing hippies, just like completely glossing over the fact that let me dedicate this episode to the 56,000 boys who did die in Vietnam, and say for them, to these trad women, shut up when you're criticizing the hippies and not understanding the underlying motive, not defending, and there's not one of them whose opinion that I know of whose opinion I value. They were completely inarticulate, and you can blame them for that. But the motive, extremely important. And when you criticize hippies, you're doing the bidding of our enemies by saying that white men should not be granted intrinsic value. One more time, I'm not saying that men shouldn't step up, and defend our people, our borders, when called upon, in a way that women should not be called upon to do. I'm not saying that. That's true. I'm just saying that they should not be considered so intrinsically valueless as to just have to go and die out of tradition, custom, and habit, mere tradition, custom, and habit. Okay. There was one more idea that I wanted to latch on to, but I basically, like I said, I wanted to finish that up because people are going to say that, well, what do? Expect people to wear love beads and have long hair and joining communes, walking around barefoot. No. You expecting to think that David Crosby's opinion is worth a shit? No, not at all. Oh, okay. There's one more thing that I needed to say about third positionism. Yeah. Third positionism might wish to make the claim that it is the position, neither communist nor capitalist, and that it strikes the balance, that only it can do it. But that's not true, and it's especially not true because left ethno-nationalism, which Japan is an example of, by the way, does provide for private property, free enterprise, along with a reasonable social leverage and safety net. Just the main social aspect is our people. It's not mainly not focused on an economic system, but it's certainly not communist. It's not even what you would think of as socialist. So third positionism, that is to say, does not have an absolute claim. And while we set aside the third positionist label, we're also setting aside the ones who would try to introduce right-wing rigidities, whether it's scientism of the Hitlerist variant, a no account idea of natural fallacy, or right-wing rigidities above praxis, above nature, whether it's Jesus or whatever else. These ideas that introduce rigidities that can be manipulated by our enemies because they're narrow on accountability and therefore narrow on social. They're narrow on social accountability, therefore narrow on correctivity and homeostasis. That's why they're inherently unstable. But also they provide means for entryism and infiltration and subversion. Like in the case of Christianity, all you have to do is convert. You don't have to be one of our genetic kind. That's because this is an idea transcendent of nature, right? Or so objectivist that we don't judge people on their DNA. We judge them on their merit in a particular skill. And therefore, we'll introduce aliens. The idea of unionization closes that vulnerability off. You are of our group. In our case, the group we're grouping our genetic groups, or you're not. And we hope to do. We'll have a meritocracy among our people where we hope that our people are good enough for the various requirements that we have. And luckily, as Europeans, we generally are. We have good doctors, scientists, philosophers, whatever. But we protect ourselves from that naivety and rational blindness of the right-wing elements that third positionism would introduce. I have you ever told to a third positionist who doesn't have more sympathy for Hitler, for example, more sympathy for Hitler than a reasonable person like myself might be comfortable with. I haven't. Or Christianity. Oh yeah, third positionism, we can have Christianity. They're introducing this stuff that's beyond praxis, beyond nature, or within nature, or in natural fallacy, below human correctivity, which was Hitler's problem, right? So I just wanted to elaborate a little more that, not only that, but also they are the third positionists don't have absolute claim to the idea that they are the only ones who can have a balanced economic system. We can have free enterprise within reason. We can have private property within reason. Some properties should not be private. Some things should be public. But what I'm saying is that we can work that out, and we're not communists. Okay. So those are. I think those are the corrections that I wanted to make for today. I was a bit sketchy where I didn't expect to go into Maslow's hierarchy with the hippie stuff and talk about socialization and how fundamental that was, how fundamental boundaries were to the concept of socialization. It was not. I didn't hit that note very well. But there is that, and that's what unionization does. It structures socialization. With your accountability to your people, you are able, in turn, to be accountable to outside groups as well and to coordinate with them. Without your own social accountability structured that way, things are just a mess. That's why it's so fundamental. I mean, you can try to take the modernist view that we're all just children of the universe and the world is our group, but I think you'll find people looking at you like quite often looking at you like you're a weirdo or naive, someone to take advantage of. Okay. I'll put the link in case anybody wants to talk. Oh yeah, and that unionization would correspond with MIDTDASEIN being amidst your people. Got more than my usual amount of listeners today. That's good. These are important ideas, and we'll just keep at it. And I hope this weekend to be talking to Per Norden and Snorkel Blog again, along with Mirth Baron. Be a good thing. I don't mind if Thor Mittuns wants to talk as well. That's fine. I reflected on it and asked myself if I was being a bit touchy, and I don't think so. because I know these are important matters. So, and I also know that they need to be, my articulation of them needs to be heard a little bit, because they're not going to get it anywhere else. Not even in the various and its sources from which I cultivated these ideas. You know, and these guys are brilliant. Mirth Baron made this brilliant observation when I said that. Well, we're talking about war being dysgenic, right? World War One was the particular example, and I said, well, an argument could be made that it was selecting for guys who weren't naive enough to get themselves killed in a big man's war. Boom, boom. Mirth Baron came back and said, that might have been true were it not for the fact of conscription and the heavy propaganda stigmatizing conscription resistors. And it's like, point well made. War is dysgenic, and was that war, World War One, ever horrific for European interests? The end of modernity, indeed, and calling for the postmodern turn, and for the postmodern turn to be understood correctly. Very, very important. That's why I'm not, even though, well, I think that Snorkel Block can take it. When he said, I don't hear people talking the way you do about post-modernity. And I think the normies need something simpler, like, just to know what's evil. Now, he did, in defense of him on that score, he was, in saying that, counting on a little bit more coloring and understanding for the quote normies of what was evil, but nevertheless, they need more than that, and the discussion of how postmodernity is supposed to work is not too complicated. And it's not something to be put aside. People don't know what to do. They get misguided by someone like Mencius Mollbug with his neo-reaction and dark enlightenment to go back into all these like ridiculous arcane traditions, which have nothing to do with our requirements, which are not what we need, which is not what we need to save us. It's not the understanding that we need. What is it when people don't know? They don't know how to manage what to take from tradition, or that you can manage taking some things from tradition, participating in some things of tradition, without the pangs of self-loathing that you're a conformist and an insufficiently progressive and modernist person, taking the best things of modernity and putting aside the destructive universalism of modernity running roughshod over our forms and ways of life. When you know how to parse these things, and parse these things from monoculturalism, which is where the whole anti-racism thing is headed, to where anybody who makes these distinctions is going to be not even seen as a human. The monoculture will allow for only one thing, one race, the human race. And if you say that, if you don't want to be blended away, then you are going to be, then you're going to be dehumanized. And again, so people have to understand these distinctions. Anybody there? Want to join the show? Say hi. If not, I'll give it 2 more minutes. I had to say, I think the most important point was that I not be seen as someone who's defending hippies and all that. I'm tired of that stuff a bit myself, to be honest with you. Even the music, which I loved so much, I'm just like, not listening to it a lot. I'm not. I did like the music and whatnot, but I'm not yearning for these stylisms and calling on people to take these stylisms. It's that, and I don't, like I said, I can't think of one hippie whose opinion I value. Not one. That's not the point. And I don't want to be associated. I don't want people to think that that's my point, that I'm defending that stuff. What I am defending is the motive beneath for white men, for being amidst our people, for white men. That was not an intrinsic valuation of white men that was not articulated. Although it was a clear manifestation of that in being toward death, which they were, in being subject to the draft into the Vietnam War. Okay then. Thank you, Pigger, and whoever else was listening. Oh, he does ask me a question. What do I think of the relevance of hippies today? They're kind of, the guys who are like doing the look have tended to incorporate a bunch of stuff, extraneous stuff, like Rastafarianism and liberalism. To some extent, a lot of them, I would guess, have been incorporated into Marxist ideologies, which is new and bad. So I wouldn't commend these later permutations, while I would say that the essential motive of hippies from the time of the 60s remains as vitally important for European peoples. I got temporarily distracted from an important point that I wanted to make. Something about this Rastafari, the jive of these later day guys who are taking on the appearance of hippies. What was it? Let me think for a second. It should come to me. Oh, but it won't. I can't remember. So, let me backtrack. Hippies were a net loss for society. No, they weren't. That's bullshit, Tiger. Protested war without being degenerates. I wouldn't even say that they were necessarily degenerate. Some were. Some right-wingers were. I don't put up with critics of hippies. That's shallow. That's a shallow take on the whole situation. Dan, there was one thing that came up, was an interesting thought. It'll come to me later. It always does after I've stopped the show for a while, and I'll just have to deal with that. Okay, so that's enough on that topic for now. And see you on Saturday or Sunday. And bye for now.